Have you ever wondered how to use digital stamped images on your papercraft projects, particularly if you're used to using physical stamps and dies? So on the CraftStash blog, we have a fantastic range of free downloads for you, particularly at the moment some Christmas digital stamps, which I absolutely love. And I thought it would be helpful for me to show you how I transfer those onto a physical card rather than a digital card. Now I have a printer at home that was around about £50. It was very inexpensive quite a few years ago. It's simply a family printer for the occasional document and letter, a bit of homework maybe, so it's nothing special. Now I also use quite inexpensive copy paper as well, so again nothing special there. So I wanted to test out my mediums for colouring before I got into a full project. So I've taken one of the digital images and I've simply duplicated it. Now I do this in a Word document and I'll show you that in just a moment. But I've taken the images, I've printed them off. I haven't given them any particular dry time, so maybe about 5-10 minutes to go and find my materials. And then I've coloured in. Now this first one is with alcohol pens. The second one was with watercolour colouring pens, and the third one was with pencil crayons. So my observations, besides the fact I did go over the line here, so this is nothing to do with any particular bleeding through the paper, the alcohol pen definitely held up the best. So I didn't get any bleeding of the black line image and I didn't get any bleeding of the ink either. Now with the watercolour, it didn't actually affect the digital stamp ink, so the black printed ink there at all, but what it did do is bleed into the paper because I guess it's wetter. It doesn't evaporate and dry as quickly as alcohol pens, and it was probably more saturated. So yeah, so I've got a little bit of bleeding there coming along, so I wouldn't use watercolour pens for this. Then the pencil crayons. Now I do love the effects, the ombre look that you can get, the shading you can apply, the fact that you can layer your colours up nicely. Obviously there's no bleed with this because it is a dry medium, but we did lose detail in the stamp. So if you look at the lines between the leaves, we've completely lost these here because that pencil crayon sits on top of the black image rather than soaking into the paper underneath. So for me, for this paper with my printer, which is an inkjet printer, I'm going to be using alcohol pens. I definitely suggest you do this the first time you try using digital stamps. It will only take you 10 minutes just to test out and see what your paper and what your particular printer ink is best off working with. So I like to bring my digital images into something like a Word document. I can insert these from the file that I've downloaded them to. I'm going to choose a really pretty wreath here. So you can just simply drag to resize, and the handy thing is they have the centimeters there, so you can sort of drag this to exactly the size that you want. So I'm going to put this at around about 6 by 8 centimeters, something like that roughly. Now I'm just going to turn this round to how I would have it on my card, just so it's a bit more visually pleasing for me. I might make that a little bit bigger actually, so I've got lots of room to colour in. Yeah, that looks good. So what you can do now is things like, for example, I've got my text here. I've actually changed my text image by going to the color tab at the top, and you've got the option to change it to lots of different colors. I've just gone for a very pale grey. I've also added in a shape. So this is just simply by adding in a box, a rectangle. I've filled it in black. I've sent it to the back. So if you go to the top here, you do actually have bring forward, send backwards for all of your images, so you can play around with those. I'm going to just position my text inside of my box there, and then I'll just send this to print. Now when you're designing your layout for your digital stamps, designing your card, when you're thinking about that, don't forget you can mix your digital stamps, your digital images and assets with your existing craft supplies. So your stencils, your dies, your other, like your rubber stamps, you can mix them all in, of course. So don't think that if you're creating a digital based card that it has to be completely digital elements. These are just an addition that are going to build your craft stash. So obviously I decided to go with my alcohol pen, so I'm just colouring in the element here. Now I'm Not too fussy with my colouring. You can take hours over this if you want to. Lots of blending, lots of different shading techniques. When there's lots of colours in a relatively small space like this, I will usually only use sort of 2 colours for shading within any element. Some of them, even like the cinnamon sticks for example, and some of these leaves, they only have 1 base colour. Now that my image is completely coloured in, before I cut this out and fussy cut it, I'm actually going to back it onto some cardstock just to make it a bit stronger. So if I want to raise this up onto foam pads, for example, it's going to be able to hold its own, particularly in the smaller areas. So the way I do this is I usually use a spray glue, so a repositionable spray glue. I've still got the name covered up because I've used this one on TV channels before, but this is Crafter's Companion one. There are lots out there, but this one's as good as any. So you can either use spray glue. If you don't have a spray glue though, you can just use just a wet glue, but I would suggest get a piece of foam and just dab it on the back very lightly so you're not soaking through the paper with your glue. So just going to spray this. Now with this glue you need to leave it 30 seconds before you then adhere it to your cardstock. I'm not going to do it with the sentiment because with the sentiment I'm going to show you that heat embossing technique. So just pressing that onto the cardstock in the back there. Lift this off because that will be a bit sticky elsewhere. And then what I can do is I can take my fussy cutting scissors and I can cut that out. Now to strengthen this one, I'm just going to tap it into some clear embossing ink. Obviously, depending on the size of the image, you may want to take the ink pad to your paper instead. So just try and make sure that is completely covered. As long as your ink is dry, it shouldn't affect that whatsoever. Then I'm going to dip it into some clear embossing powder as well and make sure that this is totally covered with this too. And now I'm going to heat set this. So now my sentiment has a glossy finish and it's definitely more stabilised as well. So now I'm going to pop these onto a simple card. So I'm just going to use a pale blue Distress Oxide just to add a little bit of colour where I need it. So that's going to be behind the wreath. And just keep repositioning my wreath to make sure that I've got that in the correct place. And to really make the black of the sentiment and the stamped outline stand out, I'm going to use a black ink spray. I'm going to undo the top and just flick some black splodges around. So this is completely optional. It's something I love to do, but if you're not into the sort of mixed media look, then this part might not be for you. And there's a finished card using the digital stamp. So you can download these for free from CraftStash. That's on the blog. You'll find lots of other free downloads and inspiration there as well. You can shop any of the products that I've actually used, such as the distress inks, the blending brushes and the tools on CraftStash. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel just here for more tips and tutorials like this. And we think you'll really love this video just here.